Welcome to the Yo Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
Also known as the guy to your right.
The guy to my right. Yeah, that should have been the name of the podcast. The guy to the right.
The guy to the right.
Yeah. Listen, let's get right into this. So we're going to talk about now. It's July 7th, 2023 when we're recording this.
Belated
And-
4th. Happy.
Yeah, happy belated 4th. And so we're going to be talking about Spider-Man, specifically Spider-Man across the universe, but we're going to be talking about the original
Into the
Into the
universe. And maybe even between.
Apologize if I sound a little more like Barry White on this episode. That's a story from maybe the end of this episode. You know, it's funny, Mike. We were talking about the story. One of the previous episodes we did, I think it was the Disney live action versus animation episode that we had just put out.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about this story where, on one hand, you've got Pixar cleaning house, presumably,
Crazy.
apparently, right? And then you got Lord Miller on the other side, who could probably sustain the animation world for years to come, because
shockingly,
4,000 animators on these films. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
It set a record, right?
It did. Yes, I believe it did set a record.
Yeah.
It was well over 100 animators that have been involved in both of these. What I read was the original film, from what I was, when I was researching it, it seemed to me like it sort of started off with one animator, and then they took the concept and those designs, and then it just got crazy and
snowballed.
It snowballed.
We got to point out, when we're talking about Spider-Man, is this bizarre sharing of rights between Sony and Disney.
Yeah, and you seem to have that down pretty well. Yeah, give us a quick where does Spider-Man live? Who owns Spider-Man?
Literally, east of the Mississippi, it's Sony, and west is Disney. Anaheim, if you go to Disneyland, you'll see Spider-Man walking around and waving, and there's a Spider-Man ride. Now, here on the East Coast, in your neck of the woods, Universal has a Spider-Man attraction.
Man, you shouldn't be out here. Doc Ock on the loose. This could be the most dangerous night of my life. And yours.
Yeah, well, out in California, what is it? The Avengers campus, whatever?
Correct.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Avengers Campus.
If you look up on YouTube, you can see Spider-Man getting slingshot into a brick wall, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, and that all started back when Marvel started rolling with the hits, and then they wanted to bring in Spider-Man to the Avengers. So he showed up in Captain America 3, which I don't think it's Winter Soldier. It's the Civil War, Captain America Civil War. Spider-Man shows up, which was a great get for Disney, because Spider-Man's an iconic.
That's right, Tom Holland
character.
Yeah.
Right. So he was the first one to step into the Disney world.
That's right.
And the other two, Garfield and Tobey Maguire, they were strictly Sony. But then we get into the animated. And where we're at today is kind of a sharing of the character, because movies, you can't stop a movie from going east of the Mississippi or west, it's everywhere.
Well, and some of it, I believe, I don't know if you came across this, and I think I have this right, but there was a 2021 deal with Disney, which I think involved them getting rights to stream these films only after Netflix got their hands on it. And they have, what do they call it? Like a pay one window where they've got 18 months.
Correct.
Once it gets released to streaming, and then, it'll eventually be able to be shown on like Disney Plus, for example.
And then they had Spider-Man for a trilogy, and then they had to stop and renegotiate. And those renegotiations were really rough. Sony wanted a huge chunk of the profit, more than they were getting. They figured Disney's, every single event, Avengers related movies making $1 billion, they can give us this one. And what happened is Tom Holland actually called the studio executives, and he kind of played mediator.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Because he wanted to stay with Marvel, because it was red hot at the time.
Let's share the sandbox, as it were.
Yeah. So anyways,
So
but we're talking about today is a
yeah.
completely different Spider-Man, which is Miles Morales.
Yeah, and, it's going it seems like it's the trajectories it's going on to be maybe one of, if not the most successful Spider-Man franchise.
Yeah,
Not to mention the spinoffs we're gonna see from this and some that have already been announced, which we can talk about, but let's give some of the deets here. Let's talk about Into the Spider-Verse first. Released in, December of 2018, right? So it'd been 5 years, which isn't unusual for a film of this scope because it would have been 4 years that Across the Universe came out in April 2022, but again, another film delayed by
delay.
COVID. So
Yep.
now Into the Spider-Verse was directed by Bob Persichetti or Persichetti. I'm not
I
exactly sure of the
yeah, me
pronunciation.
either.
Peter Ramsey is, I think, maybe more the central person there in the directing trio, and then Rodney Rothman. Peter Ramsey also directed an episode of Mandalorian season 3 too, just throwing
Oh, I
that out
didn't know
there.
that.
Yeah. Which there's also a Star Wars connection to Lord Miller, which we can talk about. Lord Miller being Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, of course, the United States directing duo, writers, so forth. So they did the screenplay for Into the Spider Verse.
Were they the 2 guys who did Solo for Disney and then got
Well,
fired?
all right, Mike jumping ahead to the
Okay,
details, but
sorry.
no, that's perfect
Yeah,
because, and it's interesting because I think it's Amy Pascal who's like the producer on this, and she goes way back with these guys, back to when they were doing like Lego movies and things like that.
right. They did
Invol
Lego Spider-Man.
These guys, it seems like they either get fired or they're close to getting fired on most projects that they're working on, which is what happened, as you point out. They were 3 months or more into filming on Solo: A Star Wars Story, which, if you haven't listened or watched it, we have a fantastic episode on that.
Why
Mike
you
and I
should
may
love
be
it.
the only two, yeah, why you should love Solo: A Star Wars Story, which many people do not, which really ended up being the Ron Howard version, right? He comes in at the
Correct.
end to save the day. We never have seen, of course, the Lord Miller version, but the
But
story goes
some of
that
the footage is used
is it,
in
yeah.
Solo. Yeah.
But I think they were trying to bring too much of a comedic element to it. That
Yes.
that I mean, that's what Lucasfilm claims and the stories
Right.
are. So who really
Who
knows?
knows what's going on in
And they took
those.
the high road. They were like, "Look, we were happy to be involved with it, whatever."
Yeah.
But that was one instance. But there was a previous instance, like I said, on one of these earlier films they were involved with, where they and Amy Pascal had a falling out, and they were fired, I believe, from that project. So, but these guys clearly are establishing a pretty good pedigree. I mean, they're not chumps.
And they're obviously comic
Yeah,
fans.
and now these guys went to Dartmouth, right? Kind of near our neck of the woods.
Yeah. Right down the
Um,
street.
yeah, I think Lord, I believe, is from Miami. I think Christopher Miller's from Seattle, or I might have it backwards. But well, let me just connect the dots here. So Across the Spider Verse course just came out June 2nd, so that's only been
Correct.
out for about a month. Now, directors on Across the Spider Verse, Kemp Powers, who did Soul, which won
Right.
Best Animated Feature,
Correct.
as did Into the Spider Verse, the original
Exactly.
picture.
Exactly. Which
Um,
was shocking that Disney and even DreamWorks, which I think is still below Disney, which is
yeah,
hard to do, but
yeah,
it was shocking that Sony wins the best animation Oscar.
right.
Crazy.
It's like, it's not Pixar this year, come
Right.
on. So
Everybody was like,
yeah, even Lord, they were like, not, oh, it's us.
yeah.
But now again, Lord Miller do the screenplay for Across the Spider Verse, so their thumbprint is all over this too. And
Mhm.
as I mentioned, this one was originally slated to come out like late April of last year, and then was delayed due to COVID. You got a runtime on Across the Spider Verse of 140 minutes, which I believe is the longest animated feature film. Let's talk about some of the uh, featured players here in terms of
Yeah,
voice
there's a
voice
lot of
actors.
them.
Okay, now
Yeah.
let's talk first about Into the Spider Verse. So first and foremost, you got Shameik Moore. Okay,
I think though the very first Spider-Man voice we hear is Chris Pine.
well, I'm talking about Miles Morales.
That's what I'm talking about,
No, it's
because
not.
Peter Parker is in
Right,
Miles
but there's like
Morales.
Peter B. Parker, which is played by
Correct.
Jake Johnson. There's Peter Parker. The original
But
Spider-Man,
it starts the
right? But that,
very
yes,
into
but it,
starts with Peter
correct, correct.
Parker.
But yeah, so you're right. In fact, the Chris Pine voiced Spider-Man I loved because it's a very sort of like Deadpool-esque kind of take on it, like a
Mhm.
lot
Which
very
word is he's going to be in as Captain
yeah,
America.
right, right,
So we'll
right.
see.
But you're right. That's the first Spider-Man voice that you
Yeah,
hear in the film. But so Shameik Moore, who plays Miles Morales
in both.
as Spider-Man, correct?
Mhm.
Now, right, he's
Mhm.
working on a film called Dope,
Mhm.
and
No.
the brass for that for related to Sony Pictures, in the animation department, all that are on site for this award show or something. They
Mhm.
cross paths and
Mhm.
they have him do some like voice work for some testing they're going to do. They end up liking what he does, and then he's cast. Now he put this in his journal like 2 years before this ever came to fruition, and then it came to be. So I
Right.
just said the power of positive thinking, but I thought that was a kind of a cool thing, and he's got that essence about him. This guy's all about good vibes. It's like
Oh,
just
yeah,
like
and
the
he's a big
character.
guy.
Well, he's a boxer too, so
Yeah,
you might not
and
want to
I
do
think
that. Yeah,
that's he looks like a boxer.
yeah.
And then you hear him doing young Miles, and it was almost jarring for me when I first saw
Which is
him.
just him doing him. Really,
Right,
he's not doing a
right.
voice. That's just
Well,
his voice.
from the first to the second, he matures.
Yeah, but there's not really any change in his
There's a
voice.
little tweak in his
Nah, I
voice.
don't think so.
Totally, yeah.
You see that one? What's that one called?
Home party.
Just missed a few classes.
Oh, just a few classes. Well, what's a few?
I mean, like 5.
So here, let me quickly run down. Shameik Moore, Miles Morales, Jake Johnson plays Peter B. Parker. Okay,
Correct.
stay with us, folks. Hailee Steinfeld plays Gwen Stacy or
Great
Gwanda
job.
or Gwanda. I forgot that she was in True Grit, the reboot of True Grit. That she was
Oh, I
played.
did too with
She
Jeff
played
Bridges.
the young girl in that. Yeah,
Oh, that was her.
that was her.
Wow.
Mahershala Ali, who plays
Mhm.
his uncle
Uncle
Aaron.
Aaron.
Yeah, or AKA the Prowler.
Correct.
Brian Tyree Henry plays who I love as Miles' dad. I just love that character so much.
Yeah.
Lily Tomlin,
Plays
Luna,
Aunt May.
yeah, Luna Lauren Velez, who plays Miles' mom. John Mulaney, who one of my favorites, plays Peter
Spider-Man.
Porker
Yeah.
or
The
Spider Ham.
Looney Tunes Spider-Man.
I really love that Peter Porker. Kimiko Glenn, who plays Penny, which is kind of like an anime character, sort of inspired by, they call it manga, which is like a Japanese animation style, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's Kimiko Glenn. Nicolas Cage, of course, who we love on the
Right.
podcast.
And do you know what his
Your,
name is?
your favorite plays the Spider Noir,
Yeah,
Spider-Man Noir.
Spider-Man Noir.
Yeah, I figured
I
you'd love it.
love
Now,
that.
there's talk he may be back for Beyond the Universe.
Oh, okay. Because he
Beyond the
was not
Spider-Verse, sorry.
he's not in the current one.
He's not in the current one, no. Although, well, there's a quick glimpse, as you like to say. There's a quick glimpse of him at the very end of the film, towards the very end of
Yeah.
the sequel. And then Liev Schreiber, who this guy, talk about a guy who he could change his voice like nobody else.
I
It's-
love
I never know when it's him, though. He was the voice of those, the documentaries they always did, and they may still do them, I don't know, leading up to the NHL Stanley Cup
Mhm. Yeah.
playoffs. And I never
was
knew that was him. I was
Yeah.
always shocked. And even when I know it's him and I'm listening, I'm like, I can't get it. It's crazy.
Right.
So he, of course, plays Kingpin, like a
He-
major role.
Exactly.
In the
He
film.
was he did Orson Welles in
Yeah.
RKO 180
Yes.
or whatever the number is.
Right.
Have you seen The Manchurian Candidate?
I don't think I saw the reboot
Okay.
with Denzel, right?
Yeah, that's one of my it's a great reboot. Well, the last one I would mention is Zoe Kravitz does
Yes, correct.
MJ. It's a brief role. And
Yeah.
she doesn't do it. Somebody else took over.
Yeah, Zoe Kravitz, good. Yeah, we've talked about her in the podcast before too. Of course, in the Batman, and she was in Kimmy. Remember, we did an
That's
episode on
right.
Kimmy,
That's right.
which was a Soderbergh film. Catherine Hahn, actually, we should mention too, who's in it,
Mhm.
plays like the sort of Doc Ock character. And then
you're-
you mentioned Chris Pine already.
Yeah.
Into the Spider-Verse had a budget of $90 million. It's grossed almost $400 million worldwide. Okay, that's the first.
Mhm.
We already mentioned it won Best Animated Feature in 2019.
Yep.
About 177 animators worked on this film. And I'm going to circle back to that point later on as we start talking about the third film in the trilogy, which is going to be
Okay.
Beyond the Spider Verse, because there's some controversy out there about that. Can you talk a little bit about this very key aspect of both films, which is this innovative animation style?
Yeah, it really is unique. You know, when I first watched it, I wanted to say Pixar, Toy Story,
Hmm.
but it's not that. And then I wanted to, compare it to, regular animated. It's kind of a unique
Oh, it's its own thing. It's its own
uh
thing because they're basically taking, I mean, there's a lot of nuances to it, and we could go into a whole multiverse trying to
right,
first understand it and B explain it. So,
right.
extend us a little grace here on the Spider-Man episode if we don't get it all correct. But it's like render. It's like CGI blended
Mhm.
with 2D, hand drawn. Now that's something else we talked about,
Right.
right? You're like those
Exactly.
days are gone. Well, not in the
There's
case of
some in here.
Spider Verse, right?
Now, I'm gonna say a name of a movie. I think you'll remember it, American Splendor,
Yeah. Who was in
with
that?
Paul Giamatti, Hope Davis. But Paul
Okay.
Giamatti, it's about Harvey, Pekar. That should jog your memory.
Yeah, it's
He's a
been too
guy,
long.
he's in Cleveland, he calls himself the number one nerd. Well, he was a friend of, I forget his first name,
Maybe I
Crumb.
maybe I didn't see it. I might not have seen it.
He's a friend of Crumb. But anyways, when I first started watching the film, after Pixar came American Splendor,
Mhm.
which was basically about a guy that read comic books, and the style was very much the same. Every box had, bubble captions and was hand drawn, but Paul Giamatti was always real. So I think that was kind of the inspiration to this style. It's just my guess. I didn't read it anywhere, but in
Yeah,
fact, I went to get the movie.
all right.
Um,
I think it goes back even for I mean, I think again, it was speculated. I think they were just trying to do something different
different.
that you
And,
hadn't seen,
and
and really from the voice of some of the animators, at least what I've come across is really trying to bring you into the comic book world, like taking the
correct.
comic book and putting it on film. And I think they've done a tremendous job of that because as I watch the film, I get that feeling. I feel like I'm kind of watching a comic book.
And that's the reason I went on that slight diversion there
Yeah.
to Splendor, because American Splendor had that exact same feel.
Yeah. And
And there was a game on the Sega Genesis. Do you remember Comic Zone?
no, no.
It's on the Switch right now. If you
Yeah.
go under Genesis, you can play Comic Zone, and it's literally you go frame to frame.
Right, but the thing about them, though, what they've done with Spider-Verse, like, you don't they use the, like, the panels and the it's like you said, the kinda bubble
Exactly.
captions and things, but it's not overused by any stretch of the imagination. It's just enough kind of in there infused to sort of
Especially the second one.
right, right.
And I wanted to ask you this because, I always watch movies. People find this odd. I watch movies with the subtitles.
I do the same
And
thing. I think that's much more common nowadays.
is it,
Yeah, I think
I
it is.
you know, people have asked me, do you, because our
I don't
mother
know why
is
that
hard of
is, but
hearing, but
yeah, right.
I can hear like perfectly. But you pick up words that just seem to go under the radar and they can make a huge difference.
Mhm.
And when I watched the first one, I had the disc. See, the disc isn't out for number two yet. You have to go to the theaters.
Right.
So I thought there were more boxes
Mhm.
when I put the captions on, but I don't know if that's true or not. And I
No,
wanted to ask you if it
no,
was.
no.
Okay.
This idea, I think it's a concept called in betweening,
Hmm.
which is again, this is just another aspect of the style and the animating. Is it made me think back to the early hand drawn Disney films,
Yeah.
where they use the matte. I think it's matte plane camera they call it. You can look it up on, Wikipedia, whatever, where it creates the illusion of movement.
Correct.
And there's like this depth of field that it creates as well, but some of it's static and some of it's just the camera moving. And
And-
you see that in both of the films. Like it's
Right.
such a blend of old styles and
Correct.
in the digital world now, and it's really fascinating.
And
It's
for
really fascinating.
me, it kind of took me back to the 60s Spider-Man, which is behind me. And also it makes it so you really need to watch these films twice
Oh,
because
well,
there's Easter eggs in those
no,
boxes.
way more than twice. You could watch these films a dozen or more times
and get a lot of
and
different things out of it.
maybe see a third of the film.
Yeah.
But I was saying it's this like animating on twos. They talk about or fours or whatever sixes, and
Right.
it's really how many drawings they make per frame per second or what. It's really all of the animating geeks and folks that know way more about that than us would know all of this, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating to read about how they kind of do all that to bring you what you see in the final product on screen, which again ends up resulting in this very kind of authentic, both something very new that you feel like you've never seen before, but also
Mhm.
kind of vintage, like the
Right.
comics, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's sit with across the Spider Verse for a little
And
bit here.
and I loved the first one. Really loved the first one. I just wanted to kind of move into the second one on that
Yeah, and
note.
we don't need to. We're not going to break down the
No.
plot and all of that. You've either seen it by now, or you can look it up or watch it yourself.
And it's a cliche, which I love the way these movies use it. Okay, my name's Miles Morales. I was bitten by a spider. Well, you know
Yeah.
the rest.
My name is Miles Morales. I was bitten by a radioactive spider, and for like 2 days, I've been the one and only Spider-Man. I think you know the rest.
Exactly. Right. And the idea that sort of there's a Spider-Man or superhero in all of us kind of thing.
Right.
It's very sweet. The first one was dedicated to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, who of course were really the brains behind
And there was
the
a Stan
characters.
Lee voice.
Ditko created Doctor Strange too. Just a kind of
Oh, okay.
another
Yeah.
connection there. But they both they both passed away in 2018 when
Hmm.
that film came out, and so there was like this posthumous kind of credits
Yeah.
to them in the film. So all right, so let's talk about Across the Spider-Verse. Let's talk about some of the additional voice
Oh,
actors
God.
now. Okay, so I'm going to run
Okay.
this down real quick. Oscar Isaac, Jason Schwartzman. Okay, for you
Are
Wes
you going to
Anderson.
point out who they play?
Yeah, I'll very quickly say Oscar Isaac plays Miguel O'Hara or Spider-Man 2099. Jason Schwartzman, say that 10 times fast, who plays Spot, who's kind of the
Or the
main,
Hole?
the ne-
Sometimes he's called the Hole.
yeah, probably don't want to go around calling him the whole, but Issa Rae plays Jessica Drew or Jess. Daniel Kaluuya, who we've talked
Mhm.
about on the podcast before, great actor, plays one of the best characters in the sequel, Hobie Brown, who is this kind of British punk rock guy from
Yeah.
60s, 70s, really, really cool character.
He was one of the few guys, as soon as I heard his voice, I knew who it was.
Yeah, I had forgot myself that he was English. I forgot that.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
Karan Soni plays the Indian Spider-Man character.
Yeah.
Paviter. I know I'm butchering that from an Indian
Right.
standpoint, so that's
I'm
terrible.
gonna leave
But
that to
really,
you.
another fun character in the sequel. I really enjoyed.
Oh, yeah.
And it was based in Mumbattan, which was like this hybrid mashing up of Mumbai and Manhattan, which I thought was kind of funny. There's
And
all these
when they
different versions of Earth and specifically New York in the different universes that they're
Correct.
traveling through.
And when each one of those characters, the main kind of Spider-Man,
Yes, correct.
a stack of comic books would be thrown down
Uh-huh.
and they'd be on the cover. I like the
Exactly.
way they did that transition.
Yeah. Shea Wiggum plays George Stacy, of course, Gwen's father, who's a police officer like Miles' father. Actually, they
Mm.
have that in common. Greta Lee plays a character Lila. Andy Samberg voices. Now, this is the one that I wanted to point out. I love this because it's an old mother connection to our mom, which is there's a scene with Miles' parents are talking to his guidance counselor, Miss Weber,
Yeah.
voiced by
You don't
Rachel
even have
Dratch.
to hear her to
No,
know it's her.
and it looks like her a little bit too,
That's
but
what I meant.
voiced by Rachel Dratch, of course, of SNL fame. And our mom, of course, met her
Yeah.
in a local bakery and got her autograph. And it
Her
was
and
pretty,
Amy Poehler live,
yeah, very close
right
by.
around
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Ziggy Marley, J.K. Simmons, of course, when they
And
go back to the
he's
old original Spider.
exactly Tobey
Right,
Maguire, and
right.
he's now in the Tom Holland
Yeah. Well,
ones.
yes. And
J. Jonah Jameson is
Peggy
who
Lou,
he
who
plays.
plays Mrs. Chen from Venom, the Venom
Right,
films.
right.
It was funny to see her. And that was a live action sequence she was in.
Yeah, and did you
Very
notice,
funny.
I think in the first one, Post Malone had one he
I
swung by Post Malone.
I missed it. I gotta
It
see that
was
again.
it was
Yeah.
literally one
And we've
frame.
talked about your knowledge of Post Malone on the episode on the podcast before. And you just mentioned, there was Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, like their voices were from archive footage, but I mean still they're
Right,
technically credited.
right.
Um
Visually, Tobey Maguire shows up just in one frame
yeah, but again, it's
with
from
with
archival
Ben.
footage. It wasn't new footage.
Correct, correct.
Yeah. Now, in the sequel, in the Across the Spider Verse, something else we've talked about the art style, of course that applies to both films, but the relationships are
Yes.
much more fleshed out in the sequel. I felt like we get much more between, of course, Gwen and Miles.
Well, the first 20 minutes is only Gwen.
Yeah,
It's really Gwen Stacy take,
it's
take a
funny that
bow.
that opening sequence with the like Italian Renaissance inspired vulture character.
Yeah, yeah,
That was pretty hilarious.
yeah.
But yeah, but they're kind of the central relationship. But you got the continuation of the relationship between Miles and his parents, and
Mhm. There's
Miles and
some
his.
great,
There's so many. Gwen and her father. It's a pretty.
not only humor that we're used to, there's some great emotional beats
Oh, I mean, a lot of pathos in it
that,
for sure.
they're in every Spider-Man movie, of course,
Yeah,
Uncle Ben gets killed, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
But this one was kind of unique in the way they hit you, I thought, at times where I wasn't expecting, or,
yeah. And that
really
that
well done.
that's a lot coming from you. Now, this one, there was like six. We talked about the art styles, but there were six different styles at play here. Because if you go and you look at, they really wanted to sort of differentiate between the different characters' worlds.
Mhm.
Like Gwen in particular. And in fact, hers was, it's never not without controversy because as I was reading up on it, there's this whole, I guess, in the film, there's some references maybe to the transgender community with some flags that are observed in her room or her apartment or something. And,
Oh, I didn't notice that.
people that are like drilling down to sort of be, just hateful about this stuff.
Wow.
But when we've talked about this, it ends up getting withdrawn from some countries because of that. You know,
Wow.
and you can guess where those countries might be.
Exactly.
But more that you want to say about the relationships, because you're right. I was going to say that a lot of pathos. I was going to use that highfalutin word, but
Yeah, I
you're
just
right. It was kind of like I guess you're right in the old
yeah,
Adam's
and
apple.
I didn't go that far, but
Stone cold, folks.
but especially I like the way, Miles is kind of, when you're a kid in high school and you get a crush on a girl, and how it went from that to a little more, but they didn't push it. They set up the upside down kiss that's so famous in the
Mhm.
Tobey Maguire series, but didn't go through with it.
Yeah. It has everything you want when it comes to that. I mean, there's
Right.
like you said, there's emotional beats, there's a lot of humor in the exchange between characters, and and this was something we're going to talk about Avatar, Way of Water on a different episode, but
Mhm.
the not that they're related, but CGI, we can make a connection. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because you remember how well we know what that's gone on to do, in terms of money and success and accolades. But
Mhm.
you remember when it first came out, it was like the most stunning movie you'll ever see. It was all about the visuals
Mhm.
with really not much of a story. In my opinion, that's a bit of a weak story. Whereas here, you've got thought what they were
Wait,
able to
which
do.
one were you just talking about?
Avatar, The Way
Okay,
of Water.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
strikingly, striking visually, but
exactly.
very thin on story. Whereas here, again, striking visually, but
Mhm.
great story, great character development, or the continued development of the characters. And they did it in such a way where it wasn't one didn't detract or take away from the other.
Yeah,
I was equally engaged in the story and what was happening, while also admiring kind of what, the aesthetic of it was.
and they accomplish both humor and what you wanna name the other romantic emotion.
Mhm.
They don't push it. They don't they don't get hung up on one or the other or
Well,
jam it down your throat.
yeah.
It fits and it flows nicely.
Yeah,
Now,
there's some levity. They create some light moments as they
there's
go
some
through.
negatives in the current one for me,
Okay, what is it?
and the major one is it's too long,
Hmm.
and
Well, I
I
said 140 minutes, longest
right,
animated film.
and it's like a very good example is right now The Flash is out. You haven't seen it. I don't think you're gonna see it. But the explanation of the multiverse in this current Spider-Man was done by I called him in my head evil Spider-Man, but it's
Oh, you mean Miguel O'Hara by Oscar
yeah.
Isaac? Yeah, he wasn't. I wouldn't say he was evil.
No, but there was a clash between him and
I mean, he was trying to
Miles.
protect the kind of,
The
the
multiverse.
multiverse. So that was his role. Yeah.
And again, I'm done with the multiverses. I'd rather they narrow it down. This
Yeah.
one they blew it up.
Right. But
Now bring it back.
it gives them such carte blanche to kind of just go, it opens up the palette and the canvas for them. So I'm sure
Right.
it from a storytelling standpoint, I'm sure it's great. But you're right, it could get a little bit like,
Yeah.
wow, where are we now? I mean,
And
Earth
then
99 and this
right.
and that, Nueva York 2099. I don't know where we are.
And we almost can't give this a full review because it's only half a movie, which was very frustrating. And I don't know if it happened in your theater, but people were groaning
No, no, not at all.
in a lot of theaters.
I was kind of like, come on, man. But
Right.
because you're right, it's a to be continued sort of thing. But and it's interesting what you said with the runtime, because we should point out that this was, it was longer. And what they
Yes.
realized was, right, like, oh, wait a minute, we've got two films here in one, which is
Yeah.
why now we're getting a trilogy out of it in the first place, because it was so much story to tell. And you look at the amount of characters that you're dealing with too. So 140 probably came in a little bit, efficient by their
For
standard
them.
for them,
But
right?
see, and I didn't finish my point. I brought up The Flash. It's a very similar story. Let's go back in time, right? Miles wants to go back in time and
Well, it's not really going back in time. It's a
well,
parallel universe.
right. And he wants
See,
to
this is where you start your brain gets twisted.
exactly. And that's why I'm done with these multiverses.
I
It's
know.
like too much on my
No.
brain.
I
But
think I'm done
Michael
with you.
Keaton in The Flash
Okay.
sums up the multiverse using spaghetti noodles. Starts with 2 spaghetti noodles, not even cooked, and then he puts a bowl and he's like, "This is this." It's like 3 minutes. I get it. Let's go. And not that that movie
Yeah.
was
And
short.
right. No,
So,
and
anyways,
that
I
was a
think
dumpster
that
fire.
that was the particular storyline in this Across the Spider Verse
Yeah.
that I thought was too long.
I mean, it's hard to I can't completely argue that, because it does get a little bit convoluted as a result of that. So
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you on that. But let's
I
talk about but listen, well, hold on. Because clearly, this is going to go on to be one of the most successful films, certainly animated films ever made. The budget's up a little bit, 100 to like 150 million, somewhere in there. It's already made over $600 million,
Okay, that's
and that's
internationally.
gross worldwide.
Yeah.
Opening weekend, it made 120 million.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
July
can see where it's
4th,
gonna make $1 billion.
July
Easy.
4th weekend, which is a big weekend or used to be a big weekend
Yeah.
at the movies, it bumped back up. It was the number 2 movie
Now,
that week.
do you think Into the Spider-Verse will get any sort of bump as a result of this now? You think
On DVD
as
sales or
as
Blu-ray
typical? Yeah,
sales, I would
yeah,
say definitely.
yeah.
I would
Um,
I wanna go back and watch. Also, the PS5 version of this, it was also on the PS4. Did you ever play it?
PlayStation?
Yeah.
No. No, I don't think I did.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's almost like more in
Mhm.
the same characters, but,
Yeah.
I remember checking out, and it was on I had coupons, and it was on sale, and the kid at the register said, "I'd pay $60 right now for that game. That's how
Yeah.
good it is."
Right.
And like I said, the movie that was when the first movie was out,
Yeah.
and, the current movie's 350 in the 350s domestically. So domestically, I
It's
think
already
there's room to grow.
Well, but it's almost exceeded what the first one made gross worldwide.
Right.
So, again,
And that
the
won the Academy
trajectory
Award.
yeah, the trajectory is just fine here.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
we should point out too, because I guess I just forgot. You know me, these are one and dones, at least just in terms of my retention of the stories and everything. But this whole Donald Glover angle, and I saw Donald Glover pop up in this one,
Mhm,
in Across the Spider Verse, in a live action couple of sequences. They cut to him.
mhm.
Did you make the connection at all? Like
I
his
didn't.
Oh, so you're not
I
even
knew he was in it,
yeah. So
but I don't know what you're talking
he
about.
appears in Spider-Man: Homecoming with
I
Tom Holland.
and I don't remember him in that.
No, well, I had to go back and rewatch the
Yeah,
film, and he's basically playing a version of Aaron Davis, the
okay.
Prowler. Or,
The
I
Prowler.
believe that's
Okay,
correct. And strike me down if I don't have that right. But and there's a scene between him, like in a parking garage, with him and Tom Holland as
yeah.
Spider-Man.
Come on, man, look, who is selling these weapons? I need to know, give me names or else.
You ain't never done this before, huh?
Deactivate interrogation mode.
Look, man, these guys are selling weapons that are crazy dangerous. They can't just be out on the streets. Look, if one of them can just cut Delmar's bodega in half,
No
imagine.
Del Mars.
Yeah, the best sandwich in Queens.
But what I didn't get was that there was some, he was on that show. Is the Community? Is that the show he was in? I believe.
Yeah,
Anyways, there was some Twitter campaign
okay.
to get him to be the next Spider-Man. Like, there was this whole thing about Donald Glover and Spider-Man.
Like live action, you mean? Or are you talking I
I
mean,
think
must
maybe,
be.
but I think possibly. But then, it became kind of that, to be the Miles Morales character ultimately, which of course didn't play out that way. But and then it was some point in that show, Community, there's a scene where he comes out, he's wearing Spider-Man pajamas as kind of a little tip of the hat or a nod to this whole campaign that was going on by fans and things to get him cast, I guess.
So that must have been in the Tom Holland Spider-Man
What?
that the campaign was for.
It was probably around that time,
Yeah,
yeah. But
okay.
that's why when he popped up in
I didn't
Across the
come
Universe, I'm
across
like,
that.
"What is Donna? That was weird." Not
Yeah,
remembering the kind of through line there for him. So
and that didn't even register for
yeah,
me.
so see, I wasn't alone in that. Then I was like, "Huh?" Now, before we wrap, let's talk about. Now, we've said it would be a third film. It's going to be a trilogy, at least a Miles Morales trilogy, right? There's going to be Gwen Stacy spinoffs. Going to be all kinds of other things coming.
Yeah, did Gwen Stacy in the comics play drums? Or was that something?
I have no idea. Was that like
Okay.
the Archies? I don't know.
Yeah.
But beyond the Spider Verse, which is going to be the third one, it's scheduled to
2024?
come out in March 29th, 2024.
I don't
However,
think it's gonna make it. Yeah.
well, apparently a ton of artists have quit
Hmm.
because stating unsustainable work conditions. And I think
Really?
some of this is attributed kind of primarily to Lord and Miller, which again, their reputation maybe. I don't know if there's any connection there, but and I don't know if there's any truth to these rumors that are out there right now. And of
Yeah.
course, the studio is not entertaining it.
Right. I
Um,
thought they were behind. I saw an article where they were
but
behind a little bit in the
apparently,
animation.
apparently, like Lord or one of them, they would go through just hours and hours and however much time of animating this or that, only to have them come in and scrap it or request changes at the last minute. In fact, Across the Spider Verse was finished like 2 weeks before it got released.
Yeah, that's
Talk about right up
to
to the
right up
wire.
to the butt. That happens with some
Crazy.
movies.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
crazy.
like a crazy thing, but
But I kind of wonder.
usually when that happens and it
Yeah,
makes the news, like Solo, we talked about Solo earlier.
yeah.
Everybody knew they got fired and that Ron Howard came in to finish, and
Mm.
it tainted the opening. People were like, "It must not be good if,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But so yeah,
so
I bring it up just to say I don't know what, if any, impact that'll have on
right. I
the
don't think I
well,
given the way this one's
one
doing.
one of the animators at least was quoted as, anonymously as saying that there's no way, based on what has happened and the
Mhm.
changes they're asking for it, and the fact that Haley Steinfeld apparently had not yet recorded any lines for the film.
Oh, wow.
So all of these things combined, this one source says there's no way they're going to get this out by March of 2024.
Yeah,
So
I've
who
heard the
knows? Who
same
knows?
thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
speculation.
Now,
So
is Haley Steinfeld, is it a contract thing, or was it just they?
I'm not sure. I don't know if she
'Cause
was.
I'd hate her not to come back.
Yeah, I didn't really see if it was because she was hung up on some other project or something. I don't
Right.
know. I really don't know. But well, look, I love both of the films,
Mhm.
and I think it's a great sequel. Again, it's got action, it's got comedy, it's got romance, it's got all kinds of emotion in it. Great character development,
Mhm.
amazing animation. What these artists have done with this film. Good, really nice soundtrack too. Really, for those that
Yeah,
are into that, like really good. In fact, I got one spinning around the clock on my playlist on Apple Music right now because it's
yeah.
so good. It's
I
the song. It's
loved
the song at the end of the film.
I loved the first one.
Yeah,
I really liked the second one. I think
you,
it's a little
you
long.
got an issue with the multiverse.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
got, and I did not like the ending.
yeah,
Yeah, I didn't like the ending at all. I thought usually when you do a to be continued, or like right now, Mission Impossible is about to open.
hmm
Okay. And it's clearly, they're telling you up front, this is part one.
right.
There's a Dead Reckoning 2 coming.
hmm
So here we don't have any warning, or at least I didn't. And I think most people, the way they usually, when you have a to be continued, there's part of the story that is finished and then more that needs to be told,
Yeah,
if
right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
All right, well, there you go. There's the kind of breakdown on both, really.
Yeah.
It's kind of a Spider-Man into, I don't know how we say it, but into and across the Spider-Verse episode here of the Old Brother
Soon to be
podcast.
beyond.
Yeah, soon to be beyond the Spider-Verse. So that's going to do it for another episode of the Old Brother podcast. Been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.